Welcome back, everybody, to Anonymous Addiction Deprogramming Everything podcast. I'm Bobby C. Today, we're going to have Gil, Gil Gibbs. Okay, Gil Gibbs. Now, I met Gil on TikTok. I've been meeting a lot of young guys on TikTok, and they're really they got this thing down wired, man. They were in Alcoholics Anonymous for years. They were in a treatment center, working in the treatment center for years, and they got so much. They're so advanced that I came in like I came in over 31 years ago, and I wish I would have met these guys way back then. Gil, okay, listen to former mentor supervisor at any length retreat, former
Mhm.
recovery manager at the Arbor Behavioral Health Care, former director of operations at Complete Compliance Consultant LLC.
Mhm.
Let's see, Harmony Recovery Consultant, former how do you say that?
Interventions.
Interventionist,
Yeah, yeah.
recovery coach, sober companion at Harmony Recovery Consultant. Gil, take it over.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, Bobby. Yeah, it's been interesting as I've stepped out into actually speaking out and recording content. Because that's something that like I never thought I'd like really dare to do. Especially considering like the programming against anything so selfish, quote unquote, or self-promoting in that regard. But it's been cool to see the people that like I've been able to connect with just in a little bit of time that I've been doing it. But yeah, no, my story, as you know, so clearly stated, I am well versed in the treatment and recovery industry. Started from the bottom, right? Just at your simple grassroots location that was doing simply 12 steps, and I was all about it, on fire for it, very young. Um, and then as I sort of evolved and progressed, I started to like hit every other side of the treatment industry. Complete compliance was like literally just that, compliance, and it was helping treatment centers open up around the country, more on the state licensure side. And then all the way at the end of my career, or at the end of like my former career, and like what it used to look like was like the interventionist, right before I started to like really deprogram, because that kind of exposes you to like the very dark side that sort of exists in the rooms and how it's connected with the industry.
Let's talk a little bit about younger age when you started, your childhood. You started picking up, you started using whatever, you went to a substance. And at what age was that about?
For me, it was later than most. Because and there's a reason for it. I was about 16 when I first finally like I fell victim to peer pressure. I mean, it's pretty purity culture is pretty ingrained in Western philosophy, especially in like a affluent neighborhood. So like the whole idea of like drugs and everything, you were very much shamed, shunned. But also I was told, from birth that I had addictive genes and addiction ran in my blood, right? I was adopted. And so I was like repeatedly warned against, and even excommunicated most of my friends growing up until 16, because you kind of realize you're alone. And then all of a sudden you do it and you're like, I made a big deal out of nothing. Um, and that sort of set me on a track to like really speed up. And then college is when it like when the top really came off for me. There was finally no like oversight and like an immense amount of guardrails, so I kind of like took that freedom in any which way I could.
Yeah, everybody, people that watch this, they're going to say, "Well, were you guys even in Alcoholics Anonymous? How can you talk about it? Did you really do the program? Were you working the program? All these, we get these comments, every day when we're on the TikTok or Instagram or
Hmm.
podcast. So when did you come in? When did you get into Alcoholics Anonymous
I
or
was
NA?
I went through a program in South Jersey when I was 20 years old, and I was like when I f was first introduced to this whole concept of being an amateur alcoholic. And it's interesting because like there's such a stigma around that, right? Like I think no one really talks about like the first drink, so to speak, or like the beginning of the process. We just all imagine, or at least most people probably imagine when you say addict, like the dude under the bridge, right? And like stupid junkie, and that so coming to terms with that in and of itself was a very jarring experience, right? It took me a while to like really like wrap my head around the idea. probably for good reason, but eventually I was able to. And that's when I started practicing the 12 steps. I when I figured out that like it was a problem for me, like I could identify with it. I mean, I went full force into it. And I do think it's interesting how people like you start speaking out against like the 12 steps in any regard, and they just assume that you never did it, right? Or they immediately start to victim blame. And I was definitely one of those people for the longest time because like I did it to the letter, to the T, exactly how you're supposed to do it, right? Um, I did the steps, I think within the first year. I did the steps like four different times, or three different times in like the first 2 years. Um, and it and I was all about doing it like once a year. So I like actively practiced it the entire time. I mean, I had the service commitment, I had two home groups, like the entire circle triangle that they teach you. I was nailing that down. I was praying and meditating every single day. I was writing inventory all the time. I know the book now like the back of my hand, all the way to the point like I could even to this day, which is like not that hard to do, but I could tell you exactly what part of the book references what, and like even the arguments that probably most people will make, like when I start to speak out against it, right? Because I was the cheerleader and the mascot for it for so long, speaking out and like trying to convince people they have problems, especially working in the industry as like a recovery manager. My only like qualifications was the fact that I did the steps, right?
Right, right.
And that's what I was teaching. I was teaching these steps, right? And now I had my own little flavor on it. I was always trying to like, as I started to like mature as a person, I was like, it was very like objectionable the amount of shame that I was embodying and like projecting out onto people. So I tried to do it with love, and that's like kind of how like I even just began to like naturally wake up to um the problems with it. And I feel like if you actually do the work that's involved in the steps, like you're actually open-minded, you're actually honest with yourself, you actually look in the mirror, it's like almost like inevitable that you do wake up from it and get to this point where like you can't. Um,
That's funny you
yeah.
mentioned wake up because before this podcast, I was thinking about the red pill, in the Matrix, the red pill and the blue pill. And, finally we take the red pill, we accept the harsh truth and reality and we start waking up and we start understanding. They talk about the blue pill has to do with the choice to remain uh, blissfully ignorant. They use the word ignorant within a comfort zone, the illusion of false reality. But actually, ignorance just means lack of knowledge. It's lack of knowledge or understanding. And I can relate to that because I was gaining more. When I was starting to deprogram in Alcoholics Anonymous, I was searching outside. I kept on searching outside. So I was discovering, I was uncovering, recovering, and discovering new knowledge,
Hmm.
okay, new information outside the programming. So I started to create my own program. But I can relate to that. I hope I didn't get you off track, but continue
Oh,
with that if you can.
oh, not at all. And I think it's very interesting because one of the like words like and things I was told to be wary of like very early on was being asleep, dreaming you're awake. And it's interesting how in the 12 steps they really like kind of pride themselves on accountability and like a self-awareness, but lack it to its like completely lack it in all reality, right? And what's really going on and how like in those rooms you kind of are asleep dreaming you're awake, right? You're believing in this dream, you're believing in this reality that like I'm doing this ultimate good, like, and obviously it makes sense because like you're so vulnerable, like any bit of purpose you're going to latch onto, right? And that's part of the problematic feature of it it really preying on like a vulnerable people as you like bring them as you program them into it. But I mean, there's so many people that like I'll even talk to and that they'll be calling out people for being asleep, dreaming they're awake, right? As they are asleep, and I mean it's a societal thing too, the amount of projection we all have and self-delusion that like I think we all like kind of like catered into for one reason or another. I think it's a coping mechanism with like the amount of things that like most people have been through, especially this day and age. But no, that's definitely the red pill, blue pill. It's very interesting because there's been constant times throughout like my journey where I've had to like really face a decision, and it's like I could absolutely opt to not go any further, or I could like opt for the painful path and like to wake up and like really experience some truths. And like I guess I'm just hardwired to like go towards the ladder with a full head of steam, that sometimes you just like stumble into some stuff that you never anticipated, which was like, oh, the thing that saved my life is the same thing that like is probably killing more than it's helping.
Yeah, I sent out one of your podcasts on TikTok and you were talking about that um, placebo effect. Here's the definition of placebo effect. A benefit effect produced by a placebo drug or treatment. Okay, treatment or a treatment, which placebo treatment, okay, which is Alcoholics Anonymous, is a treatment, right? It's a programming treatment, which cannot be attributed to the properties of the placebo itself and must therefore be due to the patient's own belief in the treatment. Belief in a treatment may be enough to change the course of a person's physical illness. Yeah, placebo is a substance or treatment which is designed to have no therapeutic value. There's no therapeutic value really in Alcoholics Anonymous. The only thing I ever, I always went around in a circle with the steps, because I was trying to get to this God thing. Because
Hmm.
I was raised Catholic, so I knew what God was and wasn't and all that other stuff. But I was ambivalent and had cognitive dissonance about the higher power thing. You know what I mean? And I even went into, I left like Catholic Church. I stopped believing in the Catholic Church and I started to go to Bible studies and everything with the Christian church because I wanted this other thing. But I go into Christian fellowship and I do Bible studies with them and I'd be deprogramming the Bible. Okay. So it was in my nature. It was always in my nature to be where I'm at right now. You
Hmm.
know, and I'm comfortable being, spontaneous remission. You were talking about that. I think on one of your podcasts that most people get sober on their own or get clean. I don't like to use the word clean and sober, but clean and sober on their own.
And they definitely can, and that's like the real problem is today, like there's not like if you stumble your way into opiates, right? There's not necessarily that like runway to like really have that process where you have like spontaneous recovery or like, you know, be able to look at what's behind why you're using it, like with safety, because I mean you can die really at any moment with that, and that's why and that I think that's where like the pull comes in of these treatment centers and the 12 steps. Like at a certain point, these families, because they're concerned with their loved one, um, are going to anything that sounds like a good idea is going to go with it, right? And within our Western world and the culture and the patriarchy that we live in, like you even said it, like the Christian faith is very dominant, right? In that paternalism is very dominant. So anything that resembles that is going to be very friendly to like the parents that are supporting the child or trying to get them help, and they don't always like realize what they're doing, right? Because they're only trying to help their loved one.
Yeah,
They don't realize like what they're buying into because it's the same kind of like belief systems that were instilled in them that they never challenged, So then to hear, like I have these conversations with, my family when I talk to them and they have no idea what I'm talking about. Right. They haven't decided school and they're from the older generation, right? I was adopted, so I get like a little bit of this like there's a big gap in terms of like the experience and everything else. But it's very obvious, right? How like ingrained this purity culture is. It comes and you even track it back to like this war on drugs, right? That like I mean has done nothing but make the problem like 10 times worse, right? And only like increase incarceration, increase like the amount of usage, deaths, and everything else that's involved. But it like fundamentally, I can get with the logic of is like, oh, it's something bad, we have to remove it. But it's just such a short-sighted and simple, philosophy or simple-minded philosophy and outlook that I don't think really much people care to challenge it because it sounds good, right?
yeah,
It's
you
like,
were.
oh, take away the bad thing. It's like, of
Yeah,
course, duh.
yeah, you were talking. You just mentioned parents, and I wanted to touch you on that a little bit. To the audience, to parents, friends of loved ones that suffer with some type of addiction, any type of addiction, I don't care what it is. They may think we get comments saying, "Oh, you're trying to kill, my son's in Alcoholics Anonymous and you're trying to, you could possibly kill him because what you're saying and if he listens to you." Look, to all the parents and friends, we have compassion for you. Believe me, we know you can't fix it, and the best thing is to get somebody else to fix it. Because I've been through this for many many years, and I'm sure my parents or my wife or anybody suffered the same types of feelings because They can't do anything with us, right? So, hey, let's go over there. Give it to AA. AA will fix them. God will fix them. This one will fix them. But little do they know, it's coming from them no matter what. They chose it, they want it, and it's coming from them when they want it, not when we want it. We can't fix them, and either can AA fix them. Okay.
And that's, I mean, two very good points there, right? The first is like with the families, like, and I think it's something that like that needs to be highlighted and talked about a lot more is the amount of fear mongering, and manipulation that they go through involved in the industry, right? I can't tell you the amount of conversations I've been a part of, um, where the owners of certain companies are really preying on the fear of like losing their loved one, right? And in a very vicious way, where families are scrambling, taking out second mortgages on their house to pay for treatment or some life-saving coach, and swearing up and down that they have the remedy, right? Despite zero clinic like minimal clinical evidence to support any of their claims, but it just sounds very good and it's very emotionally manipulating. That's so easy to fall into, right? So it's definitely something not for the families to blame themselves on for sure, right? But at the same time, it's like, be wary. I think there needs to be more conversations around like the ethical or unethical practices of like many admissions um parties and business development parties that like exist within this realm, because like, I mean, we've heard the horror stories of like the body brokering, right? And you only hear them like once in there, but then it's like people forget about it as if it didn't happen. Like those same people just like start a different company and are doing the same thing,
Yeah,
you know?
like it's still not happening. It's happening today.
Hmm.
Alcohol, look, alcohol, substance use I don't, I don't like labels. Me personally, I don't even buy into the substance use disorder. I don't buy into the disease concept. I don't buy into labels. I don't even like to use say I'm in recovery or I'm sober. This sober, sober thing. That's all people say is, "Oh, I'm in sobriety, I'm in sober. I'm clean and sober now." Uh, and the illusion of that time, the time, how much time we have equates how smart we are, how intelligent, or how much we know about recovery because we have some time in. I don't know exactly where in the big book I was trying to look for, and I'll find it because I always can find it because I'm always looking back and doing podcasts, doing all the steps and traditions and concepts. Bleeding deacons versus elder statesmen. You know,
Hmm.
they wanted to put that in there just for, because I became a bleeding deacon. Okay, eventually that's what I was. In their terms, that's bad. See, if you're not an elder statesman and doing all the programming and putting other people through the programming like Moonies, and sitting there being quiet if you got 30 years, 20 years, if you're an old elder statesman, old man or old lady sitting there nodding and winking, and everybody, all the newcomers looking at them and making sure that, oh, he's nodding. That must be right. They must be saying it right. Do you ever get that in some meetings, with the old timers? All they do is look to him and they look over to him and make sure if he's nodding or shaking his head. But that's a control mechanism. And
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was the old time. Like, I mean, I was around
I
for
was too.
11 years. People were all look at one point or another, very much like looking, maybe up to me or to me, um, for like my thoughts on different things. And it's very interesting because like I would even say, right? No, all we have is today. I would actively be saying that, right? Saying, and because it's the big book says all we have is like a daily reprieve, and so they like will like just parrot and parrot and parrot that. Yet at the same time, their actions show and the way they're conducting themselves that time does matter, right? And so there's a lot of conflicting things that like, even though there's like these cliche sayings that sound really good, like seldom is it actually executed in a way that it would probably intended or should be. And part of the problem too is like that, kind of the religious bypassing of it, right? Because like it says it's spiritual, and it's very inviting that like, oh, you can like do this your own way, sort of, right? Especially if you've had like a bad experience with the, Western religion, or Western philosophy around Christianity. And but by the end of it, you are practicing religion like through and through, right? You become an evangelicalist, and even though they say like it's attraction rather than promotion, right? There's so many things that like just are not fully held or practiced, and it's hard because you sound super resentful, which is like the number one thing they warn you against conveniently.
Yeah,
Right?
right,
So
right.
you can't even like speak out against it because like then you're labeled as a charlatan and then all of a sudden like you get distance and it's like, oh no, he's a problem because all you're doing is disrupting the structure that
Exactly.
probably needs to be disrupted. But it's kind
Exactly.
of interesting how like it's definitely branded and the culture is in a way, like you said, where you ought to fall in line or else it will be very inconvenient and uncomfortable for you.
Yeah, you'll be out and you'll be shunned. Definitely. I was, look, when I was in, I never, never was like disruptive but I would say things that the old timers, which I was one. I was in there over 31 years. Okay. It's 30 years. So I was the old timer just saying things that were disruptive. So the other old timers would come back every time I said something. They would make sure they come back and they would critique what I said to bring the agenda back into the programming because I was like saying things that were helping people deprogram from what I s- found out that wasn't true. And I would say it very nicely because I knew how to. Look, when you're in there so many years, they can't. Nobody can fool you because the veil's been lifted. There's nothing you can hear or see or say that I don't know. In a meeting. Uh, yeah, you're shunned. No matter what you go against it, you're shunned. And that's what we're talking about prior to coming on here: the fear, the shame, and the guilt.
Hmm.
I'm gonna feel guilty and shameful because I'm speaking out. It how? Honest, open-minded willingness, that's bullshit. It's only honest about the program, only open about the program, and only willing to work the program. There's no open-mindedness because as soon as you start speaking out openly, you were shunned.
Yeah. And it's like an internal repentance, right? Almost like you get, it doesn't matter the age, it doesn't matter what else is going on, like mentally, potentially, right? You just get this like sort of like label and you never graduate, right? Which from anything that we know, you do it long enough, like it's just like that combats a lot of just conventional logic, right? And really underestimates the potential of any single human being, right? For all of time, humans have been able to like grow, evolve. That actually that's our consciousness, right? That's like the one thing that separates us from like any other mammal on the planet is the our ability to reason and everything else. And you get really stuck in kind of this loop, right? Because you get targeted at such a vulnerable point in your life, right? Like you get a sponsor and but then at the same time there's no actual leadership, so there's no oversight into these processes. So anything can be happening in those things and in those relationships, right? And it really sets up a very um potentially problematic culture and toxic culture because it puts these like nowadays these young people in positions of like to be at the peril of the people above them, right? And so that I know you've seen this, witnessed this, um, maybe even been a part of it at one time or another. I know I have. It's like the 13th step, right? And or anybody that's in like this like leadership role that like technically isn't a leader by their standards, but that's in this leadership role and then you come in there very vulnerable, stuck, not knowing which way to go, of course you're going to lean into like what literally everyone's talking about. Like you are shamed into it, right? Because if you're not doing all the steps, like if you were a recover or a newcomer early in recovery, you come in there and be like, I'll stick around and hang out with y'all, but I'm not doing the steps, at least like where I'm from. That's a problem, right? And they won't like maybe actively say it, but the gossip behind closed doors, which I have sat in all those conversations, heinous, absolutely heinous, right? There's very little love, compassion, everything else. And I know because I was also the person spewing these things like for too long, right? And that was like probably the hardest part of the process is like when I started to wake up to like a lot of these harmful features, I was like, wow, did I really played into this stuff. Like I was one of the biggest proponents of like some of these things that were going on and like again, well intentioned. So I can imagine most people in there, you are almost stuck into programming, right? It very much is an indoctrination because you can't even see it, right? You'll have all reason up to a point and then like drop it off. And you won't even consider things that like may be very, very real. And especially when it's like systemic, right? Because like if it happens once, okay, cool, it's just one person. happens twice, three, four times, and they even use this, right? They're like, if five people tell you you have a tail, you probably have a tail, in reference to your drug addiction. But if five people are saying this is abusive and nobody, then oh no, it can't be because it's not the program or it's just that. And it's so interesting how easily they are to separate like the systemic issues from like and put the blame on the individual and not see the patterns that like reoccur over here. And I'm sure we'll see it in comments. I see it in comments all the time. I make a simple video on TikTok and there's like half a dozen people saying the same thing. Like, oh, I had this experience. Oh, I had this experience. And it's like, holy shit. And then there's like two 12-step apologists that are like actively being the least compassionate people in the room, which is I just find interesting that like people seemingly evolve and become better humans once they can deprogram.
Yeah, well, look in the mirror, take your own inventory. Don't take other people's inventory. Deny what reality is in the meetings, in the groups. You know, look, meetings are like it's like fake. We come in there and we become these we put these masks on. We become these elder statesmen. We become these sponsors. We become this spiritual gurus. You know, awaken people. We're different, and then go outside. Go hang with them. Go. I used to hang with these people. Okay, they were just human beings screwing up just like me. Okay, they would talk one shit in the meeting, one stuff in the meeting, go out and somebody cut them off in a car. They'd be screaming and yelling, getting out of their car, and everything. That's human beings, and but come back into the meeting and be fake because I was a hypocrite.
Yeah.
I was a hypocrite in the meeting. Here I am believing one thing on the outside and coming in the meeting and spewing some other stuff. I was lying to myself, in these meetings. But let's talk about a little bit. We don't we have only about 8 minutes left. Listen, let's talk
Mhm.
about fear, guilt, and shame after we even left Alcoholics Anonymous. We were talking about that a little bit. When I first started doing this about 5 years ago, I was like, oh my God, wait till a couple of my friends find out. Wait till a couple of my friends find out that I'm, doing these deprogramming podcasts. I'm going to be really, they're going to shame me, shun me. They're going to tell me I'm a hypocrite. Bobby, what are you doing it Bobby's way? What are you playing God and all this other stuff? There still hits me some fear and shame and guilt still
Oh,
today.
for sure. I mean, you even tagged me in a post and I immediately removed it out of that same fear, you know? And that's a very real aspect. Like I have to deal with that consistently. I'm still like I still have friends that are in the program that are part of it, right? Um that are good people too, right? There are
Good
because there
people.
are some people that like actually have integrity, right? And it's interesting because you'll find those people, but they will they won't they're so good that they just don't say anything, right? They just want to keep the peace, right? But they're great, fantastic people. And so I have friends all over that work in treatment centers that like have sober livings that um I still see frequently at the gym or anything else, and I can't talk about any of this stuff. Right. One of my best friends, like I tried to bring up this conversation and that was like I hit the one I got to a point where I couldn't, right? Because there was this survivorship bias that like he couldn't get past the thing that like but that he attributed to saving his life
Right,
is potentially the problem, right?
right,
And very problematic here and there. And again, he can identify even the hypocrisies between the individuals, but not bring himself to have that. And when you do kind of like finally shake out of that, you're like, oh shit, because you built your whole community there, right? And especially depending on what age you were, right? Again, if you're a young kid like I was, 20 years old, I grew up I essentially matured as an adult in the rooms and in this culture. So the idea of stepping away from it is earth shattering, right? And a lot, I don't think a lot of people like can really stomach it. I'm glad it kind of happened gradually over time. And then like eventually I just like was able to, I felt well enough to be like, nope, I can't be a part of this anymore, right? For one reason or another. But there's so much fear, guilt, and shame. Even like you said, even today, I can't speak my mind openly, right? Without knowing I'm gonna get castrated as like a charlatan or as like some like you said, like, oh, Gil's his own sponsor. Gil's trying to be God, like, and all these like cliche sayings that we like kind of use to like disempower the individual. When all reality, like I'm speaking, like when I speak up, it's like I'm asking for the individual to be empowered. I'm asking to consider all options. And it's very interesting how they hop on a self-righteous, hill of like, oh, you just don't understand, or like, you're just like you've fallen off and like gone back. When in reality, it's like, no, I'm kind of just asking that we like drop the fear and shame based part of it. Like, can there not be a better way, right? And then you find with at least within the steps there isn't, right? It's the shame and guilt is foundational in there, right? To a point, right? Because you have to stay indentured. You have to stay humble as if it was like day one, which is like, again, devoid of just like all general fact and reality is like, no, time progresses. You evolve as a person, even as you're doing these things, right? That you can be doing in therapy or anything else. But there are like good components of it, right? The self-awareness is a cool piece, right?
Yeah,
There's some CBT skills involved there, right? Spirituality is a very cool concept if you find it on your own, and can be very helpful. So there are these things, but it's like it's the way they're layered in. And then it's the way you're meant to stay in subject to it the
yeah.
entire time and in service to it.
It's
Right.
created that way. It's been created and designed exactly that way. It's not by chance, it's by design. So, I don't know how it'll show me when we got about 2 minutes, 3 minutes left.
But yeah, there's definitely alternatives, and like I think the biggest
Yeah,
thing that you're speaking to as well too is like we're not broken. You
no,
don't need to surrender yourself to this like whole process to stay sober. In fact, like maybe ditch the whole abstinence idea and just be like, and that's why I love harm reduction is like bring it into a way that like feels comfortable for you. Because in all reality, if it doesn't feel comfortable, it's probably not going to stick. Right. And you need to gain that intrinsic motivation. And like when you heal from something, it should feel like liberation. It should feel like you're free, not in service to this thing that you have to be doing your entire life. Like, do I need to be hitting a meeting like 5 times a week for like
yeah,
I did that for 8 years.
yeah,
I was
yeah,
going to meeting like so the amount of like deconstructing that I had to do it was insane for me to like really like see clearly. And but that's like what's prescribed for most people, right? Like 90 and 90, like all these like again, things that sound good, but all it really is just repetition, right? You do something like that for 90 days a week, an hour a day, it's something's gonna stick at some
yeah.
point, you know?
Repetition is the mother of brainwashing and also the mother of skill through
Mm-hmm.
repetition. Um, yeah, yeah. So, where you at in Texas? Austin?
Austin, Texas.
Austin, Texas. We got a common buddy over there, and your friend Macaulay, right? You'll give a
We do.
shout out. Give a shout out to Macaulay over there.
Oh no, I love Macaulay. Me and Macaulay go way back.
What is that? Sexton Space over there on
Space.
TikTok. Sexton Space Macaulay over there. Shout out to Sexton. I'm going to be doing a podcast with Rini over there on Unconquered Healing tomorrow, I think.